So my name is Rachel Isaacson, and I'm with Community Solutions. And so this is part of our Skillshare series. And today we're going to have Keba doing a presentation about her sheep. And just to let everyone know, as I said before, this is going to be recorded. So if everyone would just be mindful of that. I'm not sure if anyone is going to be able to show their camera or not. But without further ado, I'm going to have Keba begin introducing herself.
All right, thanks, Rachel. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. My name is Keba Hitzeman. I am the owner and shepherdess at Innisfree on the Stillwater farm. We're located near Pleasant Hill, Ohio, up in Miami County. I'm going to go through a little bit of the farm information and definitely talk about the flock a little bit later with some videos and a PowerPoint presentation. And then after those two sections, we're going to take a short break, and then we'll be back and I will be doing a demonstration of the tools that I use to take everything from the wool on the sheep all the way through making a finished product. So, Rachel, for questions, we're going to ask that you put questions in the chat box, and there'll be some appropriate time, some good pausing places where we can get those taken care of and answered to the best of my ability. So, Rachel, if you want to go ahead and start the first video.
Yeah.
Welcome to Innisfree on the Stillwater.
There we go. How's that, everybody?
85 acres, right next to the Stillwater River. I have a series of 3 videos I'd like to show you for the farm tour. This first one is in our summer pasture where the sheep and the goat flock stay for the majority of the summer. As you can see, we've got some lovely grass growing here. It's a little bit overgrown. I didn't get them out here as soon as I wanted to in the spring, so it got a little taller, but they've done a wonderful job of knocking things down. Grass is our main crop here. We do the pastures for the sheep and the goats. We do hay. Then we also do organic corn and other crops as well. This area is about 6 acres. And on the other side of that fence is about 20 acres. It's a combination of one of our permanent hay pastures and also a rewilding area. There's limestone underneath the ground here, underneath the soil, and there's a lot of underground water as well. Some of that water has decided to come up in what used to be part of our hay pasture, so we decided let's let it grow up. We'll graze the sheep and the goats a few times through there to keep the weeds knocked down, to keep everything healthy, a healthy ecosystem. And so that is a middle area there. We don't mow that. It's been going wild for about maybe 3 or 4 years. We've got a lovely stand of milkweed, yay for the pollinators. There's several varieties of aster, some, I think it's mountain mint. I have to verify that for sure. And a whole bunch of other stuff in there as well. So the pollinators love it. It's a nice rewilding, a little nature area on the farm, I guess. So that's about 20 acres over there. I'm going to pan around here. You'll see some of my sheep and goats, a few Livestock Guardian Dogs, a shelter that nobody except the goats use. The piers actually burrowed underneath of that trailer, so they have a nice little cave as well. Some more of the sheep and the goats. I've got one of my sheep helping me. This is Boo. He's very friendly. And then, of course, a couple of dogs always nearby. So this is their main pasture. This is where they spend the summers. If you have any questions, please feel free to type them in. I wish we could be doing this in person, but unfortunately that's not how the cards were dealt this year. So if you do have any questions about how we run things on the farm, the animals themselves, which I'll be talking about the sheep later since this is a sheep to shawl presentation. So I'll give you a little history about the Shetlands. Have a nice little brush pile over here. There's lots of honeysuckle on this farm, so as we can and as we're able to, we're cutting a bunch of it out, especially in the areas we want to reclaim for pastures. Put it in here. The goats and sheep love to eat the honeysuckle leaves. We have bunnies, moles, mice, all sorts of little critters living in and around it as well. So again, if you have any questions, please feel free, drop them in the chat box and we'll get to those. And I will see you at our next pasture.
Okay, so that was the first part. I did see a question come up. Uh-oh. Did you see that, Rachel? I think it was asking how many acres are rewilding. In that particular area, it's about 10 acres. Like I said, it used to be part of the hay pasture. In the last few years, there's been the springs coming up. We've gotten some really bad sinkholes, which makes it awful to take hay equipment through. So we took about 10 acres of the 20 total acres, and that's our rewilding area. Eventually, there will be a fence between the hay pasture and that rewilding area just to be able to keep the animals out of the hay pasture while we're waiting for the grass to grow to cut it for hay. That's our newest area for rewilding. We actually kind of consider ourselves an unofficial nature preserve around here. We live along the Stillwater River, which borders us on the west and the south side. There's about, between 100 and 200 feet of woods that have been left to grow up since the early 1900s. My parents bought this place in 1968, and they left a lot of good farm ground go back to trees and wild areas, which has been wonderful to help clean the river. It's been wonderful to catch any runoff that comes down the river when it floods, because we live kind of south of some very large conventional farming operations in Miami and Darke County. So all of that stuff runs off into the river from the fields and comes down the river. And so we would prefer not to have that stuff on our organic fields. So we do as much as we can to mitigate any pesticides, herbicides that other farmers use in the area. We also have a stand of woods that it's been really cool to watch. I grew up on this farm, and it's been really cool to watch this woods grow up. It went from maybe a couple, 3 dozen trees to a lot of young saplings, a lot of multiflora rose. If you've ever dealt with multiflora, you know how invasive that can be in this area of Ohio. I don't know about other parts of the country. I see that we have some participants from, I think I saw Wyoming and another state. So I don't know what you guys have as invasives in your area, but we have the honeysuckle, we have the multiflora. But it was really cool to watch as the woods grew up. The multiflora, it got smothered, which I didn't think anything could kill multiflora, but apparently no light can. So that was really cool to watch that grow up. And now we're letting that sit for a little while longer to see what else will be taken out of the lower story. And we'll go through and maybe clear some trails for walking. So does anybody have any other questions before we go to the next video? If you do, just drop them in the Q&A. Rachel, cue it up.
As you come into our farm, you'll notice that we do have pastures on each side of the driveway. This one over here is we call the West Hill. And this is it used to be a sheep pasture, then the fencing got bad and was taken out, and we decided to put the fencing back in. Lots of trees have grown up in here, mulberry, some, I think that's hackberry over there, some honeysuckle along the western edge, excuse me. And so we're trying to reclaim this for pasture. You can see it is kind of weedy. There is good grass underneath there, and as you can see, there's not much but stalks left. I have our nursery flock in here now. I have my sheep and goats separated into 2 flocks. The main flock you just saw out in the big summer pasture, and in this pasture, and also rotating around the farm to some of our temporary pastures, is the nursery flock. I want to keep the babies separate for about a year. That way they don't get bred, because at this point they need to concentrate on growing themselves and not growing a baby. So hopefully we'll see a few of them in a few minutes. Over here is actually my front yard. We decided to fence this in for our farm dog. She doesn't stay with the stock. She's kind of an indoor-outdoor dog. And it also turns out that it's a great pasture to rotate the sheep and the goats through. The nursery flock takes care of this area as well. Cattle panel, it's an investment, but boy, is it fantastic for putting fence up that you don't have to stretch. And if something falls on it or a panel gets broken for some reason, it's very easy to replace. So again, over here on the West Hill, there's a concrete pad. There used to actually be a little hut here that we had sheep when I was in high school for 4-H, but that building fell down long ago. And so it kind of got to be a dumping spot for logs and things like that. Now there are some areas of the farm that I do want the sheep and the goats to go through, but I don't want them to be permanent. For example, over here, since we need to have access to the fuel tanks and for some different areas there, for some different things there. So we came up with a couple of ideas. The first thing we came up with was corral panel. These are 10-foot lengths here. As you can see on the other side, we actually started with 16-foot lengths, and we wired cattle panel to it because there's a nice big hole down there that sheep, goats, and dogs can get through very easily. Turned out the 16-foot panels weren't the best idea. They're very bulky, they're very difficult to move, and they're very heavy. So we switched to the 10-foot panels, and that's a lot easier, especially if I have to move them myself. And as you can see, we've set up a little pen here, right next to one of our barns. I don't want this permanently fenced in because I do need to get into the barn. And then once they're finished in here, I can just take these panels down and move them to the next area. So pretty much this whole section up by the buildings, most of it doesn't have very good grass, so I just mow it with the bush hog or the string mower. But there's some areas like over here next to the barn that do grow really good grass. I don't want to waste that, so I put temporary fencing up and let the sheep and the goats run through. It maybe takes them, some places maybe only a couple days, some places up to a week. But they do a fantastic job keeping the weeds down. All right, here we go. Some of the nursery flock. Some of my baby goatlings and one of the lambs. I don't know where the rest of them are. The next thing we discovered with moving the panels that even the 10-footers are pretty heavy. So we decided to make our own. These panels here are sheep fence, and they are wired to conduit pipe that you can get at any of the big box home improvement stores. And then a Kickstarter campaign, I believe this is called Maker Pipe. These are little connectors that you just use an Allen wrench for. They screw together. You can see they hook together at the top. Let me pull that back so it's a little easier to see. So this is one length of pipe here, but then to make the T, we have it there. Here we go. We have Star, and there's Cosima, and that rear end view is Diamond and Helena, and that's Faylene, the sheep with the ear tag there. These are really light panels. I can actually carry or drag 2 of them at a time. And all you need is a little length of chain and a connector, and you've got temporary fence that's easy to set up. You don't want to run this in very long of lengths because it will get a little bit tippy. It's not as sturdy and stable as the corral panels, but boy, it does the trick if you just need a little chute like what I've built here to get them from that west hill onto the barn hill, which doesn't have any shelter. So I wanted to make sure they still had access to shelter, and we don't need to get through that driveway anyway right now. Any questions? Next video is going to be showing their winter habitat.
Karen, I didn't even think about using landscape orientation when I recorded these videos. It's a brilliant idea, very obvious, and I will remember that for next time. So I guess we'll just have to suffer through portrait orientation this time. Going through these, let's see, there was a question here from Saskia. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, with the conscientious knitting community. That's very awesome. I want to know more about that, actually. Protecting the fleece from the bushes and the shrubs while it's still on the sheep. That's actually a very contentious question in the sheep raising community, believe it or not. There are shepherds and shepherdess out there that do put coats on their sheep. They're made of heavy duty duck, or kind of like the drop claws that you use for painting. And then they have straps that attach on their chest and underneath their belly to keep them on. They're fantastic. They do keep the sheep a lot cleaner. However, they are super expensive, and you need to buy usually about 4 coats per sheep, because as the wool grows, just like our hair, you don't want it to get compressed and matted together because it's growing up against the coat, and it doesn't have anywhere to go straight, so it just kind of all crumbles and gets tangled up together. That was, I have, oh gosh, with the lambs, I have 16 sheep now, so 16 times 4, and the coats are usually about $40 to $50 a piece. That's a lot of investment. Some shepherds have the ability to make that investment, or they just coat certain sheep that have very good wool that they want to protect. So, yeah, that's just something I haven't been able to manage the funds for. There's so many things to take care of on a farm, so you got to make a hierarchy of things that are more important and maybe a little less important. So my sheep are little hay bales by the end of the winter, and I'm going to show you a little example of that. But yeah, they do rub on some of the bushes and pull a little bit of wool out here and there, but it's really not that much. Wool is a renewable resource, so I know I'm going to get more the next year. So that's something that I just kind of let nature take its course and let the sheep do what they want to. I hope that answered your question. Oh, fantastic. Yeah, it is very expensive to get those coats, and even better, they only last maybe about 3 or 4 years, depending on how hard the sheep use them, because they'll actually scratch holes in them when they're rubbing up against a bush. So it's a continuous expense. So I'm all for the people who can afford to do that. I think that's fantastic. Okay, we had a question from Rebecca. What percentage is sheep farming do I consider fence management? Most of it. I am constantly walking the fence lines, making sure they haven't rubbed it a little bit loose in spots. We have a combination of field fence, which is the stretched fence, the normal stuff you see, and then the cattle panel, like what I showed in that second video. Cattle panel holds up great. It's very sturdy. They can't really do too much damage to it. Tree limbs falling on it can. And so that's something I need to be aware of. We get a lot of wind here coming from the west, blows right across our farm. So I'm always going out after a big wind to check and make sure nothing has fallen on, no branches have fallen on the fence. As far as the field fence goes, that's actually a double whammy, because I have to keep the sheep in and I have to keep the dogs in. The dogs get a little bit curious sometimes, being Livestock Guardian Dogs, and they're Great Pyrenees. And so I need to make sure that the bottom is pinned well enough that they can't get underneath the fence and kind of scoot their way out, which one of my puppies actually did the other day. So I had to go collect him from in front of our farm. That was fun and exciting. So it's a lot of fence maintenance. We've gotten to the point I only need to put 2 more runs of fence in, one dividing the hay pasture from the new rewilding area, and one in a south pasture to keep everybody out of the creek, so we don't have any incidents with that. So those will both be field fence and stretched very tightly. But yeah, fencing is a lot of maintenance, and it is one of the main things, because if you don't have good fences, you can't keep your livestock in, you can't keep your dogs in, and then you've got all sorts of problems. So let me see, I hope that answered your question. Let me see if there was anything else that I missed here. The rewilding from Mary Margaret, the question from Saskia, and okay, one new message. We'd like you to enable us to be able to view the chat thread, so we can share resources with each other, like those ethical knitters or whatever that was called. Rachel, is that something you might be able to take care of?
Yeah, I just checked the settings, and it says that attendees can chat with all panelists and attendees.
Okay.
So she should be able to view chat. Like if she presses the chat button, it should show up to the side where it will say Zoom webinar chat in the corner.
All righty. Karen, try that if you would, and let us know if that isn't working well for you. Okay. Oh, fantastic. Saskia just shared her community. It's ja-wol.com. And if you can get into the chat, it's there in the chat bar. And if you can't, hopefully we'll be able to get that up and out to everybody. Thank you for sharing that.
Figured it out. All right, cool.
It did? It's awesome. It's good?
Yep.
All right, fantastic. If there's no other questions about that specific video, let's go ahead and go on and see where they spend the winter.
So here's where the sheep and the goats and the livestock guardian dogs spend the winter. We do get some kind of wintry weather around here, even though it hasn't been recently what I remember it being in the past. But shelter, access to water, and also where I can feed them hay is the big three for the winter. So this used to be our cattle barn. This was the loafing shed for the cows. You can see here I've kind of put together these feeder bunkers were already here, and I put around the cattle panel to make a little gate to keep the hay from just falling through. Hay is stored in the top of the barn. You see the round bales up there. Makes it very easy for me to get everything taken care of. Don't have to move anything with the tractor. Just get the pitchfork, tear the bales apart, and move and throw the hay down. So here's their loafing area for the winter. It's kind of a mess right now. I need to get that cleaned out before they come back in. They also will have access to pastures because things will still grow a little bit, especially for the Shetland sheep. They are very thrifty and they will find any little bit of green and eat it right up. Now, this is probably very overwhelming because look how tall that ragweed is. Ragweed is actually a wonderful fodder for the animals. They'll eat this. I mean, even though the sheep and the goats are about 2 feet tall, maybe 30 inches at the most, they will knock this stuff down like nobody's business. So I do let this grow. There's lots of good nutrition in there, even though it looks a big hot mess. There's actually another pasture through here that I'm going to be working on getting fenced off. We have a creek that runs through the property, and I don't need the sheep and the goats getting stuck in the mud, falling in, whatever the case may be. So I'm going to fence off the creek from them, but they will have access to the pasture out there as well. Any questions about winter care for the sheep and the goats? And this is actually a pretty big pasture area. And that ragweed's taller than I am. It's kind of fun watching them go through here because all you can see is the plants moving. You know there's sheep in there and there's goats, but you can't really see them until they start baying. And yes, it does get vegetable matter in the fleeces, but nothing that can't be shaken out when I do the shearing. Hey, they do get stuff stuck in there, but it's not usually too awful bad. So they have a nice, comfortable place. I'll put a lot of straw down so they're not just sitting and laying on plain, hard concrete. And it's actually kind of squishy now, so they get enough hay and straw build up. They got a nice, comfortable place to spend the winter. Any questions?
Okay, I saw the question about renting a goat to eat your ragweed. You actually might want to check around. There are individuals and organizations that rent out anywhere between 1 and hundreds of goats to go through and eat the debris, the bushes, whatever the person wants to eat. So you actually might want to check on that. You might be able to rent a goat from somebody to come eat all your ragweed. Let's see, another question. And first of all, there are no silly questions. I was a high school teacher for 20 years. There are no silly or dumb questions, so please ask away. Rachel and I were talking before the webinar started about how we can talk for hours and hours about the things we're passionate about. So, hey, welcome to my TED Talk about sheep. Let's see, do I tend to them daily in the winter? Absolutely, I do. They do have a heated water trough, so I do need to make sure that's filled up and constantly full. I don't want the heating element to get exposed to the cold air because that will make it go bad. And also, anything can happen. The power can go out. The water could be frozen. Frozen water is not very drinkable for sheep and goats or dogs. So yes, every day, actually 365 days a year, I am out tending the sheep. Now, I don't feed them any grain. The Shetland sheep are they call them heritage or primitive sheep. They're very, I guess, close to the ancestral sheep that they're used to be. So they don't really need grain like some of the modern breeds do. Actually, they tend to get fat and unhealthy if you feed them too much grain. So I don't feed them any grain except as bribery. They know what rattle, rattle the bucket shaking is, and they come streaking toward me anywhere I am. So that's a good way to get them moved from one area to another, is to bribe them with a little sweet feed. So yes, tending to them daily, absolutely. Let's see, Rebecca asked, what is my trigger to put them in or take them out of the winter area? Usually it is when there is enough snow on the ground that they cannot paw through it to get to the grass, or we're going to get just an awful cold snap where it's going to be, even for the sheep that have their nice wool coats, I do need to be a little bit more fussy with the goats because they don't have that thick insulating layer. So if it's going to be super cold, or if I know there's going to be a big snow coming that they're not going to be able to paw through to get to the grass, we go to the barn and I start feeding them hay. I try to keep them out there on pasture as long as I can. Last year, I believe we made it almost to Christmas. So I think it was around December 22nd, because we had such a mild winter here that I didn't need to bring them in to give them hay. They still had plenty to eat out on the pastures. So that's the trigger, big snow or super cold temperatures, that it's going to be harmful to the goats especially. Do I do my own shearing? Kara wants to know. Yes, I do. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the sheep to shawl demonstration, but I do. And how many are in the flock? Currently, I have 10 goats and 16 sheep. So, and then the 3 guardian dogs with them as well. Laura says, here in California, goats very often are used to eat the grass along big roads. I've seen videos of that. Also in other states that have a problem with overgrowth along the road. I believe in Florida, or one of the southern states that has a kudzu issue, they were using teams of goats, herds of goats to eat along the interstates to keep the kudzu at bay. So yeah, I mean, I've never seen it in person, but I'm sure for a lot of people, it's kind of shocking to be heading down the interstate and all of a sudden there's a flock of sheep or a herd of goats along the side of the road. So I'm sure that's pretty interesting for a lot of people to see. Karen says, can a parent and pre-team come put in an hour or 2 of shoveling your barn? Oh, honey, I think that's going to be a yes. We'll see how that goes, but yes, experience of farm work is very good. There's always something to shovel. There's always something to do. So we'll see what we can do about that. And Saskia says, I live in the city of Rotterdam. We have a city herd that eats along the city roads. It's weird, but also nice. That's really cool. I think the videos I've seen, they usually keep the sheep or the goats especially, since they don't have to worry about them catching up they're catching their wool in the shrubs, that they usually use electric fence or electric netting. I don't know if anybody can confirm that. Yes, they do. All right. Yeah, I kind of figured that would be the easiest way, because the electric fence you can just pick up, move to the next, push the goats along and move them to the next area. I don't use electric with my flock because the guardian dogs, they are so furry that they'll just go right under the fence. It won't stop them a bit. And probably the sheep too. This used to be a cattle farm. I was raised here and we had beef cattle. We had one heifer. She figured out electric fence only hurt for about 5 seconds. So she would get her head underneath of it the electric wire would be sitting on her neck, and she'd just stand there until the thing shorted out. And then all the other cows would go through the hole that she made to get into the pasture they weren't supposed to. Wanted to throttle her. So we stopped doing electric. It just wasn't worth it. Question from Rebecca. Do I always keep the sheep and the goats together? What is the benefit of having both species on the farm? Yes, I do mob graze them. The sheep and the goats are together. I actually don't separate my ram or my goat buck from the flock either. And long story short, the Shetland sheep only come into heat one time a year around September through December or January-ish. So I know they're not going to get bred out of season and have lambs at any time during the year. It's going to be a block of lambs coming in March and April. And as far as the goats, I'm not worried about whether the adults get bred once or twice. The kinders can cycle twice, but so far mine have only cycled once. I've only had them for a couple of years, so that might change as I learn more about their breeding cycle. But I don't even bother trying to separate the ram and the buck from the herd. I just run everybody together, and it's worked out well so far. The benefit of having both species, well, that would be the sheep and the goats eat different things. And it's kind of cool because my goats have actually taught my sheep how to eat things like honeysuckle. Like the sheep wouldn't normally eat that. They'd usually go for the grasses and the stuff on the ground, but the goats have actually taught them how to eat higher up things. And so now everybody's up on their back legs trying to reach the honeysuckle that's over their head. But it's nice because they do eat different things, and it's a little bit more even as they go through. So it's very nice to have them both running together. And Saskia has a picture for later. Rachel, let's make a note of that. And if we have time at the end to show what her picture is, I'm hoping it's a picture of the goats grazing along her street in Rotterdam. Any other questions? That does it for the videos. And now I'm going to be switching over to a PowerPoint presentation to give you some more information about our farm and the Shetland sheep themselves. So hopefully this will work. Share screen. Hopefully I can still see the chat. Okay, screen sharing. Come on. There we go. Unfortunately, I cannot see the chat, so Rachel, I'll kind of do some pausing at some different areas, and if anybody does have a question, we can go through at that point. Would that be okay? All right, fantastic. Well, here we go. A little presentation about Shetland sheep in specific. These are some of my ewes. Some I still have and some I don't. But this is what they look like. You can see they do have some hay on them, and they're more or less clean. I like them like that. So a little bit about the farm. Innisfree on the Stillwater is the name of our farm, and it's actually from my mom's favorite poem. Her and my dad purchased the farm in 1968 and started calling it Innisfree. Innisfree is actually a little island you can see over on the left there, and it's in Loch Gill in County Sligo in Ireland. It's really not much to look at. It's just a little chunk of land in the middle of the loch with some trees on it. And the name Innisfree is from William Butler Yeats, The Lake Isle of Innisfree. And it's a very beautiful poem. If you have a chance to check it out, it's very descriptive and it's a very soothing poem. I like it a lot, and I see why she used that as the farm name. We actually added on the Stillwater to it because we found out there was a horse farm in Ohio that had the name Innisfree, and they had already registered it. So we added on the Stillwater to make it a little bit more descriptive. 1857, this farm is actually one of the earliest settled areas in Newton Township in Miami County. The Williams family came up the Stillwater River from the Cincinnati area and settled here. This is from the 1857 Newton Township map, and this whole area used to be the farm, so it actually used to go on the west side of the Stillwater River as well. Here's the creek that runs through the property. There used to be 2 houses back there. You can just barely see the old foundations of them now. So 1857. This is a picture that was taken in 1901 from across the river. You can see there are like 5 trees. There is nothing protecting the river from any runoff, from silting, anything like that. It is just farmland for as far as the eye can see. And over here are the buildings. Little close-up view of that. The barn is still standing. This corn crib is still standing. There's the big house. It was painted white and it was sandblasted to the natural brick color at one point. This building is no longer there. And that little shed is no longer there as well. That got taken down when a lean-to got put on the farm. In the field, these are shocks of corn. And so this was probably done with horsepower and a lot of people. So I love this picture. It's just amazing to me, the amount of work. I think farming's a lot of work now, but boy, it used to be a lot more effort to get things taken care of. Here's an overview of the farm from 1983. You can see that big barn there. Unfortunately, we had the roof blow off of the barn, and so that cupola is no longer there. They put a new roof on it and didn't put that cupola on there. I was sad because that provided some good ventilation. The creek running through the barn, then it heads south. You can see there's some more trees growing up there, but still a lot of area is farmed. These little things up here, these are hay stacks that are made in it's called a stack hand. And they're just big piles of hay that you can move around with the tractor. It was a very easy way to feed the cows that way. Just move a bale to where they were, plop it down, and they could go to town. So this is the current summer pasture for the sheep, and this area right by the 1983 is our rewilding area. Couple of views. There's the house and the current view of the barn, back when we actually got snow. All righty. Before I get into the Shetlands, Rachel, do we have any questions or comments?
It won't let me see someone's full name, but someone commented that your little ones are beautiful and they love the fact that each one has a name.
Yes.
And I believe this is Karen, says perhaps farms which used horsepower and people power cultivated more community and social independence, which would be a good thing. And they asked, how old is the house? It's very lovely.
The house was built in the 1840s, we believe. Unfortunately, some of the brick houses around here were given, they had like little year plates in them. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to find one for this house. It's one of the standard L-shaped houses in this area. So it was built in the 1840s, and as far as I can tell, the bricks were actually kilned up in the town of Pleasant Hill. There used to be a brick kiln, brick making operation up there. So a lot of the old farmhouses look pretty much the same because they were made with bricks from this area. So 1840s for the house, excuse me, but that was definitely not the first house on this property. And as far as what the comment about using horsepower and manpower building community, you are so correct in that. A lot of times I've read stories about there was one threshing machine or 2 threshing machines in the community, and all the guys and the women would just go from farm to farm and do each other's threshing and help each other out that way. We have lost a lot in in our modern 21st century society with the automation, with just the kind of dog-eat-dog world that farming has become, that you're trying to make a little bit more and get a little bit better yield than your neighbor and the guy down the road. It makes it tough to actually communicate with some of the people around here, because they're just like, oh, what I do for farming is a state secret. I can't tell you. One of the biggest things my dad ran into is talking about, because diseases would go through the cattle and kill the adult cattle or kill the young calves, but Amazingly enough, nobody ever lost a cow. Now, you know, they were just lying through their teeth about that, but it's just so, oh, I can't tell you what's actually happening on my farm because I don't want you to know that I'm suffering as much as everybody else is. Well, if we're all suffering, let's kind of suffer together and help each other out. That's my TED Talk for that. Thank you. Anything else, Rachel, before I go on to where the Shetlands are from?
Yeah, so someone asked a question right at the end of the last video, and they were wondering if there was any poisonous plants that you have to protect the sheep from.
Actually, yes, there are. The sheep and the goats, for as dumb as a box of rocks they can be, they actually do not eat the plants that they know are bad for them. We do have poison hemlock, so I try to get that out as much as possible. We have Jimson weed, which is not good for them to eat as well, so I try to pull that as much as possible. Burdock, they don't eat the burdock, and plus it has all the little burrs that can get stuck, so I am vicious with that stuff. I am ripping that stuff out all the time. But they do have their preferences, and they do have, I call them occasional foods. We do have some wild herbs of different varieties. I know there's some yarrow out in the pastures, and they will eat that sometimes, but they don't eat all of it, and they don't eat it all the time. So they kind of know what they need and they don't need. I actually do give them free choice minerals. I have a setup. Pat Colby has a natural sheep and goat care books out, where she talks about different free choice minerals to give them. So I'm doing the best that I can to give them the nutrients they need that they might not necessarily get from the grass and the hay. So yeah, but they just don't eat the stuff that they don't like. It's actually kind of nice. So there's about that. All right, well, let's go ahead and get through the Shetland part of it. We have a little overview here. We have the United Kingdom, we have Norway, we have Iceland, and right here, kind of in the middle, are the Shetland Islands. They are beautiful windswept islands, and they're kind of in the middle of nowhere. You have to take a plane or a ferry to get there. Here's a bit more close-up picture of them. Oh, sorry, I had the wrong ones. These are the Shetland Islands right here, not here. I think these are the, oh gosh, I forgot, so I won't say. Here are the Shetlands. There's actually multiple islands there. We have the main island, Fowler, Papa Slur, Yell, all sorts of Fair Isle. We'll talk about Fair Isle in a minute. So this is where the Shetland sheep actually originate. And if anybody knows about Icelandic sheep, from what I've read, they're actually related somehow, but I'm not really sure about that, so I won't get into it too much. Little short history of the Shetland breed. Over on the right hand, or on the left-hand side, we have a Fair Isle sweater. You may have seen that pattern before. This was knit out of all Shetland-raised sheep, and if you got $370 laying around for a nice jumper sweater, go for it. It's beautiful. So the Shetlands came from the primitive Soay sheep, and then the Norwegians came about 500 AD and gave us some different patterns for that, or patterns in the sheep themselves. Going through history, the Romans brought sheep there. Varieties became localized because the islands themselves are very isolated, and they started selecting for the fine fleeces. 17th century stockings were used in trade. In the early 1900s, interest in the garments became very popular, but the wool quality started to decline because they would be bringing sheep over from Scotland and other places to crossbreed because they wanted a better meat carcass. The Shetlands are only about 24 to 28 inches at the shoulders. They're a very small sheep, so you don't get a lot of meat from them. So you need to breed them with a larger sheep too. Usually it was a Scottish blackface, and that would get a better meat carcass for you. But the downside was the wool wasn't as good. Then in 1927, somebody decided to do something about this wool quality declining, so they adopted breed standards that we actually still follow today. There are two main organizations in the United States. There's the NASA organization, which any Shetland sheep that has a known pedigree can be registered with. And then there's the Fine Fleece Shetland Sheep Association, who use the 1927 breed standards, and you have to get the fleece tested every year to make sure it is soft enough and fine enough to be part of that organization. There are 3 types of Shetland sheep fleeces. There's the kindly, which is a word for soft. It's got 2 to 4 inch staple. That's the length of it. The most common fleece type is the longish and wavy. I know that sounds very technical. That's the sheep that I have. They have about a 4 to 6 inch length of wool, and it's not very a dense wool. It's kind of more open and a lot more airy. And then there's the double-coated Shetland sheep that has 2 coats, a soft coat and a coarser wool to them, and that's from 6 to 10 inches of length, and it should come apart very easily. I don't have any experience with the beaver-coated ones, so I will not be talking about them, but I have seen pictures of them that they are out there. My sheep fall in the first 2 categories, the kindly and the longish and wavy. There are 11 colors that are recognized from the Shetland Sheep Society, and this presentation will be available, so if you want to go back to get more details about something, you'll be able to do that. Anything from black to white and all the shades of brown and gray in between. The fun thing about Shetlands is they change colors. Some of them do, not all of them, but a lot of them will. This is Esri. She is one of the ewes I used to have. She was born here on the farm. This is what she looked like when she was born. She was all black. She had some white spots to her. And then as she grew over here on the right, her face got wider. And then as an adult, the bottom picture, that's what her fleece looked like. It turned this lovely grayish black color. And this is what we call AG gray. I'm not going to go into the genetics. I'm just learning about them. They're fascinating. But anytime a sheep has these little sugar lips or little dusting along the ears, it's a good chance that they're going to turn into a gray fleeced sheep. This is the newest book out about Shetland sheep, actually all colored sheep genetics, and this is by a acquaintance of mine, Irina Boehm. I believe she is from Germany, and she wrote this fantastic book, and it's just been a wonderful reference. She actually has a fun game you can play to see what color a sheep would turn out as. And then here are the official patterns of the Shetland Sheep Society. This is from the UK organization, and they actually do use the old Shetland words. So we have fun terms like Bersugget and Bielset and Katmoget and Uglet. So it's a whole new vocabulary that you need to learn, or should learn, to effectively register and talk about your Shetland sheep. Okay, Rachel, questions? Comments?
There's been a lot of comments. Let me scroll up real quick to see. So someone said that it's really cheap if it's hand knitted and beautiful. And they asked, what are the trade-offs between kindly and longish?
Usually it's a softness factor. The kindly fleeces are for next of skin garments. The longish and wavy are better for your hats, scarves, gloves, shawls, something that you might want to be a little bit more durable. It might get a little bit more weathering than a kindly fleece. That's the big difference. It's just how soft the wool is going to be.
All right, and then it doesn't show me your full name, I'm so sorry. So someone else said that Shetland yarn must be my favorite together with the Icelandic yarn, the perfect combination between soft and rustic and all those shades. Someone else said, thank you to you. What a transformation. Someone else asked, are your sheep registered with either of the 2 organizations mentioned?
Yes. Let's see, 15, well, the lambs aren't registered yet because I'm still waiting for them to decide what color they're going to be. But my sheep are registered with NASA, and my ram is actually registered with NASA and the fine fleece. I'm trying to kind of upbreed my fleeces a little bit with my ewes, to make them a little bit more kindly and maybe a little less of the coarser wool. So yes, I am registered with both of those organizations. And I just happened to realize this. Let me see if I can go back here. Saskia, is that you? I don't know how common that name is.
Yeah, when you posted this, she said, "With us, Saskia." She was excited.
Gosh.
She said it's not her, but it's a pretty common name.
Okay, I looked at that and I'm like, wait a minute. I wonder if that's her. That's fantastic, though. Okay, thank you. Okay, what other questions and comments do we have?
I hope I say this right. Where do you have your micron testing done?
There's actually a couple of organizations that do that, and most everybody sends theirs to the University of Texas. I haven't gotten to the point where because I knew mine were not going to be kindly enough to be registered with the fine fleece, so I haven't even done that yet. But you just take a sample from around their rib cage when you shear, and you send it off to the University of Texas, and they'll do all the testing for you. That's the most common one.
And then, so someone just said, "Sorry I joined late, probably already mentioned it, but what use do you give to the wool?"
I'm sorry, what was that again? You kind of cut out there, Rachel.
Oh, sorry. It says, "Sorry I joined late, probably you already mentioned it, but what use do you give to the wool?"
The wool is my main crop. I'm not raising these sheep for meat at this point. I'm usually keeping the males, and if I don't need any extra females, I will sell them to someone else. But the wool is my main crop. I'm a fiber artist. I do spinning, knitting, weaving, and I sell raw fleeces, everything from raw fleeces to ready to spin to finished and ready to knit and crochet yarn. So yep, the fleece is what I'm going for. So I want nice fleeces, even if they start out with a lot of vegetable matter in them. If they're good fleeces, that's my business.
All right, and then here we go. What process you use for wool softening?
For wool softening, once it's growing, you really can't put like a fabric softener or anything like that. What you see on the sheep is what you get. If you want to get softer wool, you need to get sheep with softer wool fleeces. So that's what I'm trying to do with my ram. He has a softer fleece, and by breeding him to the ewes that I already have, I will get lambs that have softer fleeces than what their mothers do. I hope I understood your question correctly.
All right, is there any more questions before we move on? Okay, I think that they said yes, that you did answer.
Okay, wonderful.
Question, right?
Okay, well, let's go to the next section.
Oh, wait, there's a Q&A question, sorry.
Go for it.
So Karen asked, sheep raised for meat, can their wool be used for home insulation?
Yes, it actually can. As far as I'm aware, just about any sheep wool can be used for insulation. Some of the meat sheep have, I will say, worse wool for working with as a fiber artist. So a lot of that wool is used in the insulation world. I think on a fiber shed webinar where they actually talked about using wool as insulation for someone who was building an off-grid house. So most of the Shetland wool is fantastic for the spinning, knitting, weaving. Some of it is just kind of depending on the health of the animal. It might be a bad wool. I use the bits that I take off that aren't suitable for spinning and using in fiber arts, I usually use them as mulch. So mulch, insulation, it can be used for just about anything. Good question.
All right.
All righty. Well, working with my Shetland fleece and my flock, like I said, theirs is more of a long and wavy, the 4 to 6 inch length of it. It's a we talk about having the hand, and somebody mentioned about loving to work with Shetland and Icelandic. I totally agree with that, because when you're spinning it, when you're working with it, it has just enough tooth to not go through your hands like butter, but it's not so coarse that it's going to tear you up while you're working with it. I personally hate working with merino. It's like trying to spin cream cheese. It is so soft and so slick. It's very difficult to use for me. So I like the Shetland because it does have that little bit of tooth to it. It's got a little bit of crimp, some of it's wavy, all different things that just give you a great texture when you're working with it. A lot of people want to know about the lanolin content, and some of them are very greasy, which is what we call the lanolin, and some of them aren't. It just kind of depends on the sheep. I have not discovered a rhyme or reason to that, and I would be super interested to know if there's some sort of genetic anomaly or genetic thing going on there. You see that we have a series of pictures here. This is baby Kira. That's her mom. I just forgot her name, Ruby. So this is baby Kira. This is the second picture of Kira as she gets a little bit older. You see her fleece. She starts off kind of mottled like a calico. She gets a little bit lighter. As an adult, her fleece is even lighter. She's actually a cat moget, so she has that kind of creamy brown fleece going on. And this was her fleece after I sheared it. So again, the sheep fleece that as a lamb versus an adult, it will change. It might change color from year to year. You know, it's always an adventure what I'm going to get off of these sheep. It's kind of fun that way. There are a couple organizations I'd like to make you aware of if you are into wool and fiber arts and doing stuff with that. There's the Livestock Conservancy in the United States. They are tasked with preserving and helping to reestablish rare and critically endangered animal breeds, livestock breeds. They have this program, it's called Shave 'em to Save 'em, and it's at rarewool.org. And we'll actually have a sheet that Rachel will be able to put into the chat box, I hope, that will have all of these websites that I've been talking about that you can go to them at your leisure. Sheep breeds like Icelandic, Navajo Churro, Shetland, a whole pile of other ones. They are from on a watch list to critically endangered, and this program is hopefully giving an incentive to for people to use these rare and endangered breeds in their own fiber arts. So I encourage you to check that out. This program actually is a 3-year program. I think we're just starting year 2. You get a passport when you join up, you get stickers when you buy the wool, and then you can get prizes for completing, I think, 5, 10, 15 of the breeds. There's also an organization, it's called My Local Wool. It's mylocalwool.com, and it's just what it sounds like. You can find local farmers, local wool producers, local fiber artisans and stores in your area. And if you are a yarn shop or a producer, you are more than welcome to join up. I believe it's like $40 a year, so it's not too hard on the pocketbook, and you are put on the map and people can search for you. That's a good organization to be in as well. And then finally, a newish group on Facebook, if you do Facebook, is called Wool and Fiber Arts. This started actually, I believe, in April. So, and we're already up to over almost 9,000 members. It started because of the pandemic and all of the fiber festivals were getting canceled. Ellen decided she needed to do something to help herself and her fellow fiber artists out. So she created this group. I believe the group started on a Monday, and that next Saturday and Sunday we had a live sale where basically people got up on Facebook for half an hour and did a sale of what they had to offer, and people would buy it right then and there. And since April, it has just exploded. There's actually, the monthly fiber sale is going on right now this weekend. So after this presentation, I encourage you to go over and see what's for sale and to support small and independent fiber artists, dyers, all sorts of great stuff, people who make fiber equipment. And it actually goes on. It's not just the fiber sale, it's actually an entire community. We talk about mills, breeds, teachers come on and show how to dye wool and do different things. It's fantastic. So I encourage you to check that out as well. Okay, well, that does it for that. That was a fast and furious. Holy cow, there's a lot of comments here. Okay, let me see if I can scroll through some of these. Yowza. Let's see, micron testing. Okay.
You'll make sure you want to scroll up. I posted a lot, so it looks like a lot, but you might want to.
Right, okay. Wool softening.
I think the first question is, do you sell your wool / knit with it?
Absolutely, I sell my wool. That information will be available on the, I think everything's going crazy over here. So, yes, I do sell my wool and knit with it. Innisfree on the Stillwater.com is the website, or you can check me out on Facebook. My actual web store is studio@innisfree.com, and that's where all the goodies are. So yes, I do knit, I do the spinning, I do just about everything. Why will this not let me scroll down? Things are going crazy. Here we go. Okay, oh, fantastic. Rachel posted all of the sheep to shawl resources there, complete with the links.
And those will be emailed to everyone too who registered.
Fantastic. Slightly off topic, is there any way for people to find their most local fiber breeders in the US or elsewhere? That's a fantastic question. We are a kind of antisocial bunch, being farmers. We like our animals and we don't like dealing with people sometimes. So it has been kind of difficult to get people to join these groups and organizations. And hey, join this organization. People will buy your wool. Well, I don't want to deal with people. And oh my gosh, do you want to sell wool or not? So it's kind of crazy. I would start maybe in the United States if you have a local extension office. They might know. There are, gosh, I'd have to do a little bit of digging around to see about organizations. Overseas, I'm sorry, I don't even know where to tell you to begin with that. I believe my local wool has gone international. In the Wool and Fiber Arts Group, that is mainly United States. Oh, the only thing I can think of off the top of my head is if you would go to a breed webpage like the Shetland Sheep Society or the Icelandic Sheep Society or Sheep Breeders Association or whatever it's called. That's the only thing I can think of to find breeders and wool suppliers in your area. If I think of anything else, I will definitely let you know. So yeah, it's kind of hard to find us, but we need to be more vocal and we need to be more exposed, for lack of a better word, to be able to sell our products to the people who want it. Let's see. Yeah. Yeah, that wasn't actually, I like the WAFA about. It says, in WAFA, it doesn't matter. There actually is more to that statement, but that was kind of an unfortunate place for it to stop. I think it said something to the effect of basically, in WAFA, it doesn't matter who you are, what you believe or don't believe. We're here for the fiber. We love all of you. So it's a very inclusive group. It's very, everybody come, we're talking about fiber. So yes, Karen, Studio AT Innisfree, not the @ symbol, but studio@innisfree.com. And I believe that will be in the stuff emailed to you as well. Saskia, totally. We need to encourage knitters to buy real yarn. I mean, I totally get it. Acrylic is cheap. It's available. It's great for some things to make. It's not so great for other things. But you know, wool is sustainable. It rots when you put it in the ground. It doesn't just sit there and last forever and ever and ever. So yes, we do need to encourage that. Let's see, the most economical wool possible near Greene County, Ohio to insulate a tiny house. I have to think about that. It's probably going to be one of the meat sheep breeders, but I'm not too familiar with Greene County. Let me do some thinking about that, Karen, and I'll see if I can get back to you. Actually, no, they don't do that. Okay. Yes, the book and website Fiber Shed, Katie, that's good. Yes, they do have the local and regional Fiber Shed group, so that would be another. And I do know Fiber Shed is worldwide, so that might be a great resource for those of you who are not in the United States, is to check out the Fiber Shed. I think it's fibershed.org. It might be .com. I can't remember. But they're definitely on Facebook as well to check that out. Okay, Saskia, thank you so much for posting the website there. Felicia, that is a great question. Is selling wool profitable when you compare it to the cost of raising Shetlands? For me, yes. I have money invested in my Shetlands, the fencing, the haymaking, the sheep themselves. But since I'm not feeding them grain, I'm not buying in, I'm buying in minerals, of course, but I'm not buying in hay or things like that to feed them. It's very economical. It's very, I won't say it's very profitable, but it's profitable enough for me to do that. Even selling raw fleeces, which I sell for $18 a pound, is a good return on my input into them. And yeah, unlike some other sheep people, I'm not shy about sharing what it costs for me to do this. I price my stuff. I'm a potter as well. Let me back up a little bit here. I'm a potter as well, and I've been told that I underprice my pottery. I'm like, that's cool. I'm still making a little bit of profit on it. I'm covering my costs for the kiln, the clay, the glazes, and all that stuff. I want this stuff to be a money maker income for me, but I also want it to be affordable for everybody else to purchase and work with, because I think that is so important that we have food, yarn, whatever it might be, that everybody can partake in. Everybody can come to the table and be a part of that. So, okay, yeah, fine. I price my yarn jars for $25 and other people are selling them for $40. Well, a lot more people can buy a $25 yarn jar than can buy a $40 yarn jar. I've made someone happy. They have a piece of pottery they can use to make something beautiful. Everybody wins. So I'm cool with that. Okay, let's see. It got a little ahead of me here. That still cracks me up. And Wassa, it doesn't matter. Let's see here. So yeah, that was a really long answer to your question. Did I do the workshop on which wool is less allergenic? No, I did not. How do we know if we're getting that for knitting close to the skin? That is a really good question. I think that might be Karen, because I can't, it just says KA at the beginning. That's a really good question, and you would just have to ask the person and hope that they know, because a lot of fiber people, they will take their fiber to the mill to be spun into yarn, and in that case it's going to be everything from nose to tail, all the clean wool. Someone might separate out the less scratchy bits. That's just a question you would have to ask them. And usually you can tell when you feel it, the hand of it. Is it softer? Is it scratchier? That might be a way to do it as well. But when in doubt, ask. But unfortunately, some people aren't too happy with answering that question. Katie, thank you for posting the Fiber Shed directory. And I'm happy. Yeah, I'm happy. Yeah, thank you for sharing and for your transparency. You know, I don't see a reason to keep this any secret from people. I like what I do and I want other people to enjoy it. So I'm going to price my stuff that other people can enjoy it. The pottery is on the, is my pottery on the website? No, I only do my pottery work during the winter, because the room that I'm in now, that's my pottery and kind of fiber area, is not climate controlled. So in the summer, I am just drenched. Not very much fun for doing pottery. So I don't have any pottery up there now, but hopefully in a few months, once it cools off, I will be able to get some stuff up there. Do I have a store? Deb, yes, Studio AT at Innisfree.com. Somebody did post it in the chat. You might want to scroll back up for that, or if someone could repost that, that would be fine. Let's see, someone says, I know a lot about that people are allergic to lanolin mostly and just sensitive to the feel of different yarns. If you are truly allergic, alpaca has no lanolin. I have heard that. Enough people have told me that. I'm going to say that it's probably true. Yeah, if you can't handle, because alpaca is a straight hair follicle and Shetland is kind of crimpy and it's got scales, little tiny scales, kind of like human hair does. That bothers some people. So yeah, check out alpaca. I don't know if llama would work as well, but definitely alpaca would work if you have a lanolin wool allergy. Jean says, doesn't that also depend on woolen versus worsted wool prep, whether the wool is scratchy? Jean, you're probably right. I technically know the difference between woolen and worsted, but I spin everything the same way. I mean, I don't know how it works out that way, but I tend to work everything I tend to spin everything the same way. So I think I do kind of a combination wool and worsted, but yeah, whether it's a very thin or very much thicker, airier yarn, that would probably influence whether a person has a reaction to it. I love the feel of lanolin on my hands when I pet the sheep. Laura, definitely. You can just kind of get that little lotion going on. It's great. I'm covered with, by the time I'm done shearing, I'm dripping with lanolin. My arms and my hands are it's just coming off of me, which is probably a little bit too much for most people, but it's part of the job. Deb, do I only sell online? Well, in a normal year, I would be at the wool gathering at Young's Jersey Dairy in Yellow Springs, Ohio. But since this is not a normal year, yes, I am only selling online for right now. Carding versus combing. Jean, how long do you have? Yeah, assuming carding. Yes, that would definitely make a difference as well as far as how lofty the fleece becomes and how you spin it from there. So yeah, all of those definitely have a factor of how scratchy the wool will be at the end, or if it will be scratchy at all. But it comes down to what kind of fleece are you using. Are you using a fine fleece, a kindly fleece, or are you using one of the long and wavy ones? Wow, you guys are fantastic. I was expecting a lot of questions, but these are amazing, amazing questions.
And then we got one in the Q&A too.
Oh, I missed that. Could you read that to me?
Yeah, Katie asked, what is the general quality of wool from dairy sheep? Is it suitable for fiber art?
Dairy sheep, I honestly, Katie, am not that familiar with a specific dairy sheep breed. I know that there's some out there, but I don't know about that. Typically, if a sheep has been bred for specific meat or specific dairy, that's usually, I'm qualifying this, I know, this is usually going to decrease the quality of the wool, because once you try to increase one aspect, something else has to give. I would hazard to guess that maybe the wool isn't as good for next of skin, but it may be perfectly good for outerwear or something like that. That's my best guess. That's all I can do. Good. I'm glad that made sense to you. Let's see, Saskia, crisscross fibers spun are woolen and lined up fibers are worsted. It can feel different, but a woolen spun merino is still softer than a woolen spun Icelandic yard. It's a combination of a lot of factors, definitely. Yeah, the learning and the sharing here has been fantastic. Yeah, definitely how you spin it, the original fleece. Yeah, merino is going to be softer than just about anything. That's why it is so popular for woolen yarns and for woolen garments. There's a lot of them, and they have a very soft fleece, so that definitely goes into it as well. Okay, let's take a short break. I need to switch from the computer to my phone, and if anybody has to take a bathroom break or get a beverage, something like that. We're going to take about maybe 3 to 5 minutes, get everything set up for the demonstrations, and then we will be back with part 2. Thank you so much, everybody. This has been fantastic, and I'll see you in about five minutes.